I actually listened to a security analyst talk. It was an interview with the Empire State Real Estate Trust, which owns the Empire State Building and a bunch of other buildings in Midtown Manhattan. And the general rule was they were collecting about 70% of rent. Retail tenants weren't paying anything basically, and then office tenants there was a higher percentage paying. In general, office tenants were paying, but still the average was about 70%. In May, the expectation is 50 to 60%. Now I have to update this, but my guess is June is going to be as bad, if not worse, than May. And because of that, most landlords, I would say, have a negative cash flow. What does that mean? They can't go to the bank and say, hey, can I borrow some more money? They have to go to the partners and the owners and dig money out of their pockets to pay for their expenses. Now, most people aren't going to cry crocodile tears for landlords, but ultimately that has an impact on everybody, every occupier and user of space. So I speaking to one owner, and they were telling me that they're making capital calls to a variety of their investors, and then some investors don't have the money to put in for a capital call. Others might. So then there's this whole litigation that's going to come out of, well, he didn't put in the money that he was obligated to, and so there's going to be litigation around. It's going to be a mess for owners for a while. And depending on how those LLCs and corporations were set up and how they were set up and how clear they were about capital calls. But there's going to be a cottage industry of people fighting each other who own real estate. The whole thing has turned the tables on landlords, because for years, the last 10 years, basically, it's been a landlord's market. And the vacancies were basically under 10% in most markets in the city. The suburbs for the last 30 years have been relatively soft. That is going to change entirely. But basically now it's become a tenant's market. Also, capital is tight. Again, if you own a building and you have a tenant wants to come in and lease a floor and they want the landlord to build it out, which is very typical, the landlord may not have the money to do that. And going back to, well, we have negative cash flow, so we don't have any money for build outs. So, and this is something that I experienced in the early 90s when the commercial real estate market was on its knees. But every transaction is very specific. It's very fact specific to that specific landlord, specific tenant, and the strength of each party is very important nowadays.